Okay, Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Today's daf is daf Tes. We start from daf Chesam at base, the first Mishnah toward the top of the Yomid. Yesterday we learned in the Mishnah that the only time Bezdin brings a par helam davar shel tzibur, or even a kohen godol, a kohen Mashiach brings his own par, is if he's over, paskins and he's over, on a davar shes doinei karas v'shegigase chatas. So now the Mishnah is coming to give us a new halacha, in that a sub halacha, so to speak, in that halacha, which means that it's not every chatos that Bezdin would bring a parallel davar shel tzibur for. Not every shoygig of a chatos that the kohen Mashiach will bring a parallel davar shel tzibur for. It's only a chatos kavua. Narrows down the halacha to a chatos kavua. For example, if it would have been an oil of a yared, when do we bring an oil of a yared? There was a whole sugya in Masechta Shavuos. Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav, let's say, is oil of a yared. So if it's Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav, then you don't bring a par on that. Why? Because it's not shegigase chatas kavua. And the same is with Asham Tolu by a Yochid. Yeah, a Yochid who is Mesupik, if he walked into the Beis HaMikdash, which usually, if he would be a Vada, would bring a oil of a yared, you don't bring an Asham Tolu. So that's the first halacha of the Mishnah. Ein chayovin alasei v'aloises sheba Mikdash. Which means, basically, Rashi says, the Hainu Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav. You're over on Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav, so the halacha is that Bezdin and the Kohen Mashiach is not chayiv on a Aveda of Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav because it's usually ba'oil of a yared. It's not a chatas kvua. Ve'ein mevino Hashem toli ala sei v'aloi says sheba Mikdash. The same holds true for Hashem toli. Yeah, person who's mesupik, whether you walked into the Beis HaMikdash, Matama Kachem, there you don't bring an Asham Toli, because usually if you'd be Vada, you wouldn't bring a Chatas Kavua, you would bring an Oil of a Yared. Aval Chayovin ala Seva Aloy says Shebanida. Mavim Asham Toli ala Seva Aloy says Shebanida. Nida is different, it's Chatas Kavua. So therefore, if let's say Bezdin violates or paskins wrongly and the call violates, and Asay Aloy says Shebanida, or let's say a person is Mesupik, whether your Oiver was Oiver and Asay Aloy Shebanida, there you bring Asham Toli. Eiz a mitzvah say shbenida preish ben anida, mitzvah says al tavel anida. Yeah, the mitzvah say of separating from anida. Yeah, well, and also aloy says vel isha benida stamasel isikrav. Yeah, you shouldn't be with anida. So on those, Bezdin paskins wrongly on that, or somebody's mesupik on that. There are karbonas. There's a par, and there is an asham tali. Okay, so the Gemara Menon and Mili. How do I know? Yeah, we started the Gemara on the top. Chesam Adveiz Reb Shol. Menon and Mili. How do I know that tzibur loy mechayve carbon ba'alma? They are never mechuyev a carbon except if it's a chatas kavua. It's a shoygig on a chatas kavua. The yochid oshem toli nami loy. How do I know that a yochid who's mesupik about an aveira usually brings the oshem toli? He doesn't know. But that's only if that aveira triggers a chatas kavua usually. But if that aveira triggers a oil of a yared, for example, a few averas that trigger oil of a yared, Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav, right? Shavuos Eidus, yeah? You have Shavuos Bitoy. We learned all this in Masechta Shavuos. Certain averas, if you violate them, you don't bring a fixed chatas. You bring an oil of a yared, which means it's based on your bank account, yeah, your financial abilities. If you're in the lowest class, you bring a minchas, yirasa eifel. If you're middle class, you bring an oif. Toirim Reifis, Bnei Yoina. And if you're upper class, you bring a Behema. So it depends. That's called an oil of a yared, as we spoke about in Masechta Shavuos. So anytime you're over an Aveira, which triggers an oil of a yared, if you're mesupik about it, you do not bring an Asham Toli on that. How do I know that? Right? It says the word v'oshem by a chatas, by a fixed chatas shel yochid, the end of Vayikra. It says v'oshem, and it says v'oshem by a oshem toli. Yeah, v'nemer v'oshemu b'tzibur, and it says the word oshemu by param davar shel tzibur. Ma v'oshem b'yochad mechatas kavua. Just like when it says the word oshem, it only says it in the parsha of chatas kavua, fixed chatas, which is what? Anytime a person is over an aveira that requires a fixed chatas, which is a kizbah se'ira, let's say it's mechal shabbos b'shoigig, it brings a chatas kavua. So af v'oshemu b'tzibur. So you make exer shava. Ooh, there's a word v'oshem by chatas kavua, and there's a word v'oshemu by a parhelam davar shel tzibur. What's the connection? The connection is by parhelam davar shel tzibur you need a chatas kvua. It's only by an aveira which has a chatas kvua, b'chatas kvua. Okay, and now says the Gemara, Umat tzibur b'chatas kvua. Once I've established from this gzeira shava that a tzibur is b'chatas kvua, af osham toloi nami ein ba elo al safek chatas kvua. Just like a tzibur doesn't bring a par only if it's an aveira that a yachid is chayev a chatas kvua, so too an osham toloi you don't bring on a safek chatas kvua. Yeah, it's only if it's a safek on an aveira that has a chatas kvua, but if it doesn't, then it's is no asham toli. If it's an oil of a yored, there's no asham toli. Again, because it says also the word ashem by asham toli. Okay, so that's the connection. Says the Gemara Amri Iachi. If so, if you're danik the gzeir shava between va'ashemu and va'ashem, so carbon oil of a yored nami yoksiv v'chiyasham la'achas me'ela. By carbon oil of a yored, it also says kiyasham. So Bazoi learn out from Yasham by a oil of a yored that you do bring an Asham Toloi by a Safek oil of a yored because there has the same word by an oil of a yored which is Yasham, and then it has the same word by an Asham Toloi va'ashem. So why do you compare it more to a Parel Davar Shel Tzibur that doesn't bring an oil of a yored? Compare it to the oil of a yored itself. It says Yasham there. Says the Gemara says, "Don in Ashem me'en Hashemu." You'd rather compare the word Ashem from the Tzibur than Don in Ashem min v'Yasham. You compare Ashem Toloi to Ashemu of the Tzibur rather than comparing Ashem to Yasham. Gemara says, "Really? Is there such enough kamina when it comes to Gzeir Shavas? You're so medayik exactly how the word is written. And my naf kamina. What's a chilik whether it says Yasham or Ashemu?" You can learn the Gzeir Shava of Ashem from either one. Why? The Tanda Shmuel says V'Shava Koyin Uba Koyin Zui Shiva Zui Biya. So by a negatzeras that is noticeable on one of the walls of a house, yeah. So as soon as the Koyin comes in, it says V'Shava Koyin Uba Koyin. So what's the Gzeir Shava over there? We darshan. That what? What do we darshan?
That even though it's a different word, but it means the same idea. So this is a unique exception, I think.
Yeah. So with darshan, the kohen has to come back on the seventh day again. But that's Gzeir Shava, Shiva, and Bia. So this is a very interesting Gzeir Shava. Usually Gzeir Shava has to be the same word.
No, this is an exception.
It's an exception. Okay, but the Gemara says, Al Kapanim, you see from this exception that you're not so makpid. If it's the same word, you should be so makpid that it has to be spelled exactly the same. It has to be spelled, Ashem was better than Yasham, if you want to compare it and make a Gzeir Shava to the word Ashem. Once you see in Torah B'Shmuel that you can even have a different word, yeah, then it's not so mistaber that we are so makpid. V'oid, another kasha, Neilef min v'Ashem metumas migdash v'kedashav. Should learn it from the word v'Ashem, b'tumas migdash v'kedashav. Tichsiv v'hu tamei v'Ashem. It says b'tumas migdash v'kedashav where you bring an oil of a yard, it says the word v'Ashem. So Ibazoi, Hashem Tola should be compared. Your mamish have the same word over there. The Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashav that you bring in Hashem Tola by an oil of Yared. Amar Rav Papa says, Donin Hashem v'Ashem u'mitzvos Hashem min v'Ashem u'mitzvos Hashem. By Paral and Davar Shal Tzibur, there are really two Gzeir Shavas, two similarities. One Gzeir Shavas, two similarities in the wording. It says Hashem and mitzvos Hashem. By a Param Davar Shal Tzibur, it says Ashem Mitzvah Hashem ba'Ashem Tolui. So we say there's only an Ashem Tolui when there's a Param Davar Shal Tzibur, and there's no Param Davar Shal Tzibur when there's an oil of a yared. So therefore, there's no Ashem Tolui when there's an oil of a yared. Amar Rav Rashler Papa v'Neilo v'Ashem unasiyas avain min v'Ashem in asuyas avain. 1 second, I have also two similarities if you go to the parish of oil of a yared. So meichatesi to take Ashem Tolui and compare it to a Param Davar Shal Tzibur and say it's potter from Ashem Tolui ba'oil of a yored. Compare it to the Parsha of oil of a yored itself. Over there it also has two similarities and says chayiv and Ashem Tolui even when the chet is a chet of oil of a yored. And Lo Menachem Yitzchak, no, there's more than two similarities to Param Davar Shal Tzibur. There are three similarities in the wording of the pasuk. It says Donim v'Ashem u'mitzvos Hashem asher loisa eseno. Mi v'oshem mitzvah Hashem v'sloisa eseno. V'al yichiach shmi askoy lebitus v'sayim v'tumas mikshah kedoshav shloi nemer behem v'oshem mitzvah Hashem v'sloisa eseno. You can't bring from any of the parashas of Oil v'Yored this level of Gzeir Shava, because this level of Gzeir Shava is only there by Param Davash Al Tzibur, where you have the three similarities between Asham Tali and Param Davash Al Tzibur, and that's why Asham Tali is not brought when there's an Oil v'Yored, when it's an Aveira and an Oil v'Yored, just like Param Davash Al Tzibur doesn't bring it when there's an Aveira of Oil v'Yored. Okay. Okay, Zug the Heilige Mishnah. We're up to the Mishnah, Chesam at Beis. Okay, says the Mishnah, really a repeat of what we just learned in the previous Mishnah. Ein Chayovin, Reb Shal, you with us? Ein Chayovin, the bottom Mishnah Chesam at Beis. Ein Chayovin, al Shmi Yaskol, val Bitus V'Sayim, val Tumas Migdash V'Kedoshav. Oh, lemadnu at zeh. There's no par in Doveh Shal Tzibur, in Aveira. We learned this halacha in Masechet Shavuos. Remind me. Oh, we learned all these halachas, right? Yeah, all these are sugyas. Yeah, you're right. They're sugyas in Masechet Shavuos, and here the Mishnah repeats what it learned in the previous Mishnah, the Mishnah before that. Yeah, which is Bezdin does not bring a paral hamadovar shal tzibur if they made a mistake in psak halacha on Shavuos Eidus, which is called Shmias Koil. You have albitas v'sayim, Shavuos bita. For example, they said somebody can be over on their Shavuos bitoy, or they said somebody can be over on their Shavuos eidus, or to us mikdash kadasha, they said you can be over on the isser of going into the mikdash betuma. So on those three, you usually bring a oil of a yored if you do it b'shagig. You don't bring a fixed chatas. So if bezin paskand on a dovar and an aveda that usually triggers an oil of a yored, they don't bring a paral dovar shal tzibur on that. The Gemara is going to talk about how do we know that. V'hanasi. The Gemara already talked about it earlier.
וכתוב, זוכר למדנו, אשר המלך לא דן ולא דנים אותו, ראית רבי עקיבא הנשיא אומר, רבי עקיבא אומר, הנשיא חייב בכולם, חוץ לשמוע את הכל, שהמלך לא דן ולא דנים אותו, ו' זה מה זה? זה, איפה זה? סנהדרין, דף י"ח עמוד א'.
Okay, לא ימד ולא ימד nicely, beautiful. Yeah, we've been through quite a few mesechtas together.
You know, Horayos has everything.
Horayos, yeah, has everything.
מה זה Horayos? הוריות יש הכל. הכל בה.
Yeah, so you have, it's referencing a few mesechtas. Correct.
הכל יש, בחים, הכל יש.
Yeah, that's what we said, yeah.
Well, that's scripture.
Yeah.
הכל יש, הכל נמצא פה, הוריות הכל יש. מה? You're going to see הכל יש.
Okay, so the Gemara says that Bezdin doesn't bring a param dav shal tzibur on a aveira that triggers oil of yored. V'hanasi kayotz b'em. The nasi is the melech. He also doesn't bring a carbon on an aveira that's usually ba'oil of yored. Divrei Rabbi Yoel. Okay, doesn't bring an oil of yored. Rabbi Akiva Omer hanasi chayev b'kum. Akiva says no. A nasi does bring an oil of yored, except for shmiyas hakoil. Why? Because Shmis HaKoil is pretty much when you are mashbiya somebody to come give Eidus, and you can't be mashbiya a melech. A melech doesn't have to bring Eidus. Yeah, so he doesn't. So a melech, he's not chayiv on violating a shavuas Eidus. Shamelech leidon v'leidon noisay lameid lameidon noisay. So a melech, since you can't bring him to give Eidus, he's not chayiv on the carbon oil of a yored if he lies in a shavuas Eidus. Because either way,
He's above the law.
He's above the law. It's above the law. Well, there's more of a svara because either way, usually the problem with making a false shavua and not giving eidus on behalf of someone that you can help is because you could have helped him. You could have helped him. By you giving a shavua l'sheker, you denied him from the help he could have gotten. But since a melech doesn't bring eidus, doesn't give eidus, so I never denied you from the help that I could have provided you because I couldn't provide you. Even though I had the knowledge, I couldn't provide you with the help because I'm not allowed to be made.
The halacha of a nasi.
Yeah, that's the halacha of the nasi, of the melech, right? Okay, so now we have a basic machloikus in the Mishnah between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. Two heilige tanoim. The machloikus is whether a nasi brings an oil of a yored or not, right? Does he bring an oil of a yored at least on the first two, on on Bitus Fesayim and Tumas Migdash V'Kadoshav, or not? That's the Shaila, that's the Machlokes, Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. Okay. Akiva holds he brings an oil of a yored on Shvuas Bitoy and Tumas Migdash. Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds he never brings an oil of a yored. Omar Ula, my time with Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Why does Rabbi Yossi Aglili say that a Nasi Melech never brings an oil of a yored, right? So there are 3 Averis you usually bring an oil of a yored for. Yeah, what are the 3 Averis? Shvuas Ha'edus, Shvuas Bitoy, and Tumas Migdash. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says a Nasi is exempt. If he violates those 3 Averis, he doesn't bring a carbon oil of a yored. How do we know that? Says the Gemara, it says that if he's Osham, right, if he's guilty of one of these 3, la'achas me'ela, one of these 3 Averis that you have to bring an oil of a yored for, yeah, says the Gemara, he darshans as follows. Kol shemischayev ba'achas, mischayev b'kulan. La'achas me'ela. Achas is singular, me'ela is plural. So in other words, the singular applies. You can only bring an oil of a yored on one of those 3 if it's me'ela. If it can be mechuyev in all 3. So since a melech cannot be mechuyev on Shvuas Ha'edus, says Rabbi Yossi Aglili, I see in the drasha la'achas me'ela. He has to be subject to an oil of a yored by all 3 parshias, Shvuas Bitoy, Shvuas Ha'edus, and Tumas Migdash. And if one of them he's not shaykh to, then he doesn't bring by the rest because la'achas me'ela. Asks the Gemara, ve'ema mischayev ba'achas man ve'afal pi she'ein mischayev b'kulan. How do you know to darshan la'achas me'ela in such a oifen? Maybe say he's mischayev ba'achas man. La'achas me'ela is telling you ki yeshem la'achas. All you need is one of these 3. At the time that Rabbi Segli the Gemara says, okay, it's a weak drasha. Maybe a different makar. The Tanya, Rabbi Yoel, Nemar loisagia yodov and Nemar loisasig yodoi. Yeah, it says loisagia yodoi and it says loisasig yodoi. We're talking about the carbon oil of a yored. If somebody cannot afford, the shtei toidem, he can't afford middle class. He's only lower class. We said lower class is the mincha siras eifa. That's the lowest class, the lower class. Middle class is toidem and b'nei yoina. Upper class is a behema. Says the Torah, L'sagia yodoi or L'sasig yodoi, which means that be'etzem, he just didn't reach Ashirus, but he could. That's the diak here. L'sagia, lohigia, he didn't reach L'sasig, which means mishabola de aniyas v'Ashirus. Only somebody who can become wealthy, who can be'etzem reach a higher status, and he didn't, it's lohigia or L'sasig, that's when he can bring a lower class carbon. Mishabola de aniyas v'Ashirus.
Money he has? What do you mean by that?
Of not being able to afford a.
He doesn't fit in that category. He's not no share.
No, so we're going to see in a moment. The Gemara says, Yotze Nasi Mashiach she'ein boil da'aniyas. A melech will never get poor.
That's
Right? And the Kohen Gadol also not. Why not a Kohen Gadol? We'll see in a moment.
Because all the other Kohanim give him money.
There you go. So that's it. We're up to Tesam Aleph. It's like around 4 lines on the top. So the Gemara says, Nasi. How do I Nasi can't be an ani? He's a melech. The halacha with a melech is that he can't have anybody over him, on top of him. The only one he has on top of him is Hashem Elikov. Now, if he's supported, if he needs to come out to other people for money, he's not going to qualify for Hashem Elikov, Mish'ein al Gabav El Hashem Elikov. So Mela, he's never allowed to be poor. He has to be wealthy. And Mashiach also, the Kohen Gadol, the Chsiva, Kohen Gadol Me'echav, the Medarshan, Shehu Gadol Me'echav B'noi V'koyach V'chacham V'oisher, right? Oisher is one of the criteria for a Kohen Gadol. He has to be wealthy, he has to be good-looking, handsome, he has to be strong, he has to be wise, intelligent. And Acherim Oimrim, Menayin Shem Ein Loi, if the Kohen Gadol comes into the position without money, Gadleyu Mishal Echav. If he doesn't have money, everybody has to give the Kohen Gadol money, so contribute, so he can be wealthy. He can be an Oisha. Talmud Lemar Kohen Gadol Me'echav Asher Yutzak HaRoisha Gadleu Me'echav. B'kitzur Amaisa, what do you see from here? That you have to be able to be poor in order to be qualified to bring an oil of a yored. If you're not in the category, the parsha of Aniyus Bachlal, then you can't bring an oil of a yored, even if you're an usher. You don't qualify. So Zokt Rabbi Yossi Aglili, why doesn't the Nasi, the Melech, bring an oil of a yared? Because he's not ba l'day aniyas v'ashiras. He's always going to be rich. He's always going to be rich. Now, what happens with a melech that they overthrew him? Okay, we'll talk about it. Kain Gadol that Havirois. We'll talk about it later in the daf.
That what?
They removed him. They removed him. He's not a Kain Gadol anymore.
They didn't wait for the rope around his leg.
Right? Shlomo HaMelech is a king that was removed from power for yeah. So the Gemara says, oh, right here. Sorry, I jumped against right here. A nasi is not roy to be a melech. A mitzvah can't be a melech. So what happens? He's a melech, and then they have to remove him from power because he became a mitzvah. David HaMelech 6 months, right?
What do you mean? He became Mitzvah?
Mitzvah, yeah.
אבא של יותם, שהצטרע, נכון? קראו לו מלך.
I'm embarrassed that I don't know Navi so well, but I don't know Navi. Yeah. So the Gemara says, let me know when it comes to you. So the Gemara says like this: Mit Mao. What's his halacha with Oil of Yared? He was a melech. Then they removed him. Does he bring an Oil of Yared once they removed him? Because Mitchadachi, once he became a melech, now he was extricated from the parish of Oil of Yared, and now he's potter from an Oil of Yared for the rest of his life because the malchus and the status of a king he once had totally removed. It was doicha the chi of Oil of Yared for the rest of his life. Or maybe he's just potter.
But is he now an ani?
He's just not a melech.
He's Oath melech.
Yeah.
But he's still an usher.
Oh, Amar Lei, very good. The Gemara's getting Amar Lei, Dilach or de Gaza. Don't confuse the Gaza. Dilach or de Gaza, which means. Yeah. Okay. Okay. They removed him. Okay.
למה הוא זכה? כתוב, בגמרא במסכת סוכה כתוב שרבי שמעון אומר, אני, בני ויותם יכולים לפתור את העולם מן הדין מתחילת טובה עד סופו, נכון? למה כתוב שם יותם המלך? כי עסק בכיבוד האבאים. כל זמן שאביו לא היה מלך יכול להיות מלך, בכל זאת הוא השאיר אותו כביכול מלך והוא חתם בשמו, אבל הוא לא מלך. זה יותם, זה מוזיהו, 20 שנה הוא היה צרוע.
Beautiful. So that's an example you're saying of somebody who was a nasi shenetztara. Yeah, nasi is a melech. Yeah. Uziyahu. Omar lei. So now the shaila becomes: if he becomes a metzora, does he bring an oil of the yard or not? Omar lei dilach or de Gaza, which means who does he bring? Who pays for that carbon? Yeah, which bank account shells out the money? Is it dilach? Is it your bank account? Or the Gaza, which means the treasures that he had. So still, he has treasures, and he's not going to come l'danis. Any melech that was removed from power, he still has the keys to the oitzeres. Yeah, he still has the keys to the oitzeres. Right? The keys to the oitzeres. That's what matters over here. Which is very interesting because, they say that Reichman got a bracha. Him and Rav Moshe Sternbuch, they got a bracha. One was in charge of waking up everybody. One was in charge of the bread. It's a very famous story.
Right.
Got a bracha.
Guess who
that he'll have wealth. So if somebody has a haftacha or a bracha that'll have wealth, is he also not shaykh to an oil of a yored because he has an haftacha that his generations will always be wealthy, so he can't bowl a day on
It's not Lamaisa yet.
Now he is. Today he is.
I'm saying, right, it's today.
So let's say Mashiach came, and right, I don't know. They say that Rabbi Lamelech from Lezhensk blessed his family, his descendants, to only be aniyim, to never be wealthy.
Yeah.
Would they be subject to this drasha? Only someone who comes l'dei aniyos v'ashiros, but they can never come l'dei ashiros.
So they have to have the custom with Nahum. It can't be.
Yeah, it can't be something which is a bracha that's going to come later. Yeah. Okay. So Amar Rava. Okay, so Gemara says like this.
What's the first?
Now we know Tanya. So now we go to the Braisa Oi. The first one on the line is Oi, and we say the third word is Tanya. Tanya. Bekiva Oimer. Mashiach poter mekulan. the Kohen Gadol is potter from an oil v'yored. Always, yeah? He's always potter from an oil v'yored. Rabbi Akiva said in the Mishnah that a Nasi is chayiv bekulan, except for Shavuas Eidus. Yeah? And the Brayser, Rabbi Akiva says, a Kohen Gadol is potter mikulan. I'm a Rava my time at Rabbi Akiva. A Kohen Gadol does not bring an oil v'yored, right? Not on Shavuas Eidus, Shavuas Bitoy, and Tumas Mikdash. Why? Amakros ze korban Aaron Avonov. When it says the Minchas Chavitin, the parish of the Minchas Chavitin, which is a korban that the Kohen Gadol brings every day, it says the word ze. What's ze coming to be mamayit? Zu ba chayveloi. The only type of mincha which is incumbent on a Kohen Gadol to bring is a Minchas Chavitin. What is another mincha that it's coming to exclude that a Kohen Gadol doesn't bring? It's a mincha which is Asira Se'efa, which Oil v'yored has to bring. So there's a miyat. Yeah, he says only this kind of mincha, Minchas Chavitin, the Kohen brings. But the Kohen Gadol doesn't bring a mincha of Asira Se'efa, which is part of Oil v'yored. And that's how he knows that the Torah was mamayat the Kohen Gadol from an Oil v'yored altogether. You only bring a Minchas Chavitin zeh and not an Oil v'yored. Asks the Gemara, midale dalos. Maybe the Torah only excused them from bringing the lowest class carbon of an oil v'yored. We said there are three classes in oil v'yored, right? The lowest class, which is a mincha,
Right.
Sir Se'efa. Then there's the middle class, which is Torah b'nei Yaina. And then there's the upper class, which is the behema. So if the Torah excludes the Kohen Gadol from a mincha v'asir se'efa, because it says only minchas chavit and zeh, so how do you know that excludes him from the whole parsha, from the middle class and upper class kind of carbon also? Maybe it's only excluding him from the mincha. Says the Gemara, no, it's mamish excluding him from the whole parsha. It says in the pasuk by Oil v'yored, v'chiper olav hakoyin al chatose shechota me'achas me'ela. Remember that drasha? Gavalt. Me'achas me'ela means a meskaper ba'achas. Anyone who can be meskaper from any kind of level of Oil v'yored, he can bring, if he's an ani, a dal dalis, he can bring a mincha. If he's just an ani, Torah b'nei Yaina, or if he's mamish and osher, he can bring a bema. So you have to be eligible to bring any of those karbanas. It's only a meskaper ba'achas, meskaper b'kulan. Then you're subject to all of it. But if you're excluded from one of them, then you're totally excluded from the parsha of Oil v'yored, and that's how Rabbi Akiva knows that a Kohen Gadol, once he's excluded from the minchas asira se'efa, because it says only minchas chavitin, so now he's excluded from one of those categories, from one of those levels, so now he's excluded from the whole parsha. She'ein meskaper ba'achas, ein meskaper b'kulan. Asks the Gemara, if this is a drasha, if you darshan like this, I have another drasha. It says by the Avedis that you bring an Oil v'yored v'yechiyesham la'achas me'ela. Right? Very interesting. What are the three Averis you bring an Oil v'yored for? Shavuas Eidus, right? If you swear you don't know testimony and then you lied, you got to bring carbon Oil v'yored based on your financial status. And then Shavuas Bito, if you say, for example, I'm not going to eat this kikkar, and you end up eating it, you violated the Shavuas Bito, you bring an Oil v'yored. And finally, Tumas Mikdash v'Kadasha, if you walk into the Beis HaMikdash. So the three places...
You're walking into the Beis HaMikdash?
Betuma. So so then you bring the three places where you bring an Oil v'yored. So the Gemara says, oh, I have an idea. Once you introduce me to the drasha of Achas Me'ela, so here, listen to what it says about Oil v'yored. It says, Elo me'ata d'chsiv v'hoi chiyasham la'achas me'ela hachanami d'chala mischayiv ba'achas mischayiv b'kulan. Make the same drasha. That in order to bring an Oil v'yored by Shavuas Bitoy or Shavuas Eidus or Tumas Mikdash, you have to be mischayiv, you have to be eligible to bring an Oil v'yored in all three Averis. Because she'ein mischayiv ba'achas, if you excluded in one of them, ein mischayiv b'kulan. Alama Tanan Rabbi Akiva Omer Nasi Chayiv Chutz Meshmias Kol. Rabbi Akiva himself is the one who says by a Nasi, by a Melech, he doesn't bring an Oil v'yored by Shmias Kol, by Shavuos Eidus. So according to Rabbi Akiva, according to this logic, if he doesn't bring an Oil v'yored there, then he's totally excluded from the parsha of Oil v'yored by the other two. Because you have to be Achas Me'ela. You can only bring by one of them if you're eligible to bring by all of them. But the Nasi doesn't bring by Shavuos Eidus, so why would he be Chayiv, Shavuos Bitoy, or Tumas Mikdash? Says the Gemara, no, over here it says it with a lamed. La achas me'ela, not so much. Meyachas me'ela by the carbon oil of a yored itself. What kind of carbon you bring? There it says with the men. What is the maishna ma'achas the mashmalei the kasvei rachmona lebasoif gabasir se'efa lememra dechol mechayev basir se'ef mechayev bekulan. Why is ma'achas better than la'achas? It's not because of the men so much. It's also because the Torah wrote it at the end of the parsha of Oil of Yored. Once it writes it at the end, it's pretty much going back on the prior ones and saying meyachas from any of these three that we just mentioned. That's why you have to be eligible for all three, right? If you're going to tell me that you could be chayiv and a carbon oil of a yard only by Shavuos Bita, or only by Shavuos Eidos, or only by Tumas Mikdash, nichtevei lahai machas meila bedalis inami ba'ashiros. Yeah, then the Torah should have written it bedalis or ba'ashiros. Sorry, Isal Gedaitach Mischayev ba'achas, Apishem Mischayev b'kulan, that he's chayev, can be chayev only on the middle class or the upper class. So nichtevei lahai machas meila bedalis inami ba'ashiros. Then why do you have to write it at the end? Write it in the middle. So the point is, okay, just to sum it up before we go to the next Mishnah. The point is. Okay, just with something about Rabbi Akiva's shita, because that's the Gemara's handling over here. Rabbi Akiva's shita is that a kohen gadol is potter from the whole parsha of Oil of Yored. He doesn't bring an Oil of Yored if he violates Tumas Mikdash. Does not bring an Oil of Yored by Shavuos Eidus or Shavuos Bitoy.
What does he do?
Because why? Because it says he darshans it from zeh. By Minchas Chavitna it says zeh. This, which means he doesn't bring another kind of mincha, which is the mincha of Oil of Yored. Once I know he doesn't bring the mincha of Oil of Yored, I know it says me'achas me'ela. If he is excluded from one tier of Oil of Yored, he's excluded from the rest. So Rabbi Akiva says, meaning you can never bring an oil, Kohen Gadol can never bring an Oil of Yored.
How's he get a kapara?
Seriously,
yeah. It's what?
Yeah, Sar Lazazel. He has to, whatever it is, he needs a.
Okay.
Actually, the par actually is Mechaper and Thomas. Okay, fine, yeah. Okay, he's saying, yeah. So Kohen Gadol according to Akiva is mufka from Oil of Yored. We learn it from Zeh and La'achas Me'ela, that once he's excluded from the Mincha Asiris, so that he's excluded from the other tiers as well. So the Gemara says, a nasi. Let's take a look what Rebbe Akiva holds by a nasi, by a melech. Akiva holds by a melech. He does bring for Shavuos Bitoy. He does bring for Tumas Mikdash. Brings an Oil of Yored. But he doesn't bring by Shavuos Eidos. Doesn't bring by Shavuos Eidos. Why doesn't he bring by Shavuos Eidos? Because he can't force a melech to testify. So he doesn't bring by Shavuos Eidos. So why don't you darshan la'achas me'ela over there too? Because there's the word la'achas me'ela. Once he's excluded from one category, let him be excluded from the whole thing. What? Parallel situation. So let him be excluded from the whole thing. Says the Gemara, no, because the placement of la'achas me'ela over there is not at the end. In order for la'achas me'ela to work, it has to be nichtav lebesoif. Because then la'achas me'ela is reviewing everything before, saying that one of the ones that all the ones that I mentioned. So you have to be eligible to all the ones that I mentioned to be mechuyev in this one. But if la'achas me'ela is somewhere in the middle, you can't make that drasha. So that's why this is the cheshbon of the Gemara so far. So Rabbi Akiva's opinion is Kohen Gadol is completely excluded from the parsha Oil of Yored by all three averos that usually bring an Oil of Yored, and by a nasi and melech it's only by Shavuos Eidos because you can't force him to testify, and the other ones, the other two, he does bring an Oil of Yored. Okay, so the Mishnah. Kol ha-mitzvahs shebat Torah. Shechayovin as doinen koros, v'ashegigosen chatas. The Mishnah. Yeah. Any mitzvahs, Mishnah, kol mitzvahs shebat Torah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Shechayovin as doinen koros, v'ashegigosen chatas. Ha-yochid mevi kizbe se'ira. The yochid that did the aveda b'shoigig, we know, right? The chatas yochid is a kizbe or a se'ira, which is a she-goat or a sheep. V'hanasi.
Now sheep, a zachar and a kevel.
And a kevel. Not a kesed, and a kevel. V'hanasi, what does the nasi bring for a chatas? He has to bring a soyer. U'mashiach bezdin, the Kohen Gadol and bezdin, mavin par. Abavedes kechavim, and when they're over on an isra avodah zara, hayochid v'hanasi v'mashiach, they're equal mavin se'ira. U'bezdin par v'soyer par lo'ila v'soyer l'chatas. Okay, so far we just summarized each person's carbon, what kind of carbon they bring for which Aveira. What about Ashamais? So here, Asham Talui. What about Asham Talui? When you have a suffix, whether you did a Isser, that usually your Chayiv chorus for B'mezid. So Hayochid V'Nasi Chayovin, they're Chayiv and Asham Talui. If they're Mesupik, whether they did the Aveira. On Mashiach and Bezdin P'tura. Mashiach and Bezdin don't bring an Asham Talui at all. Asham Vadai. What about Asham Vadai? Hayochid V'Nasi V'Mashiach Chayovin and Bezdin P'turin. Ashmiyas Akol Albitas Fasayim. What about Shmiyas Akol Albitas Fasayim? Altumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. Those are the carbon oil of a yard. What about carbon oil of a yard? Right, that's just another way of saying oil of a yard, because those are the only three that bring oil of a yard. Bezdin P'turin. Bezdin doesn't bring an oil of a yard. V'Hayochid V'Nasi V'Mashiach Chayovin. Ooh, this is a third Tana, right? Because we. It's not like Rabbi Akiva, and it's not like Rabbi Yosef Glili either. So this is a third time. This is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yechui. Oh, va'yochid va'nosi va'mashiach chayovin. Yeah, they do bring a oil of a yared. Elo she'ein kohen gadol mashiach chayiv al tumas mikdash v'kedashav. There's only one exception, that a kohen gadol doesn't bring a oil of a yared al tumas mikdash v'kedashav. Divided Rabbi Shimon. We're gonna unpack him in a moment. That's Rabbi Shimon's opinion. A mohein mavian. And what kind of carbon
does he bring?
Does the Kohen Mashiach bring on Shmias Kol and Bitas of Asayim? Yes, what kind of carbon oil of a yared? Right, he brings oil of a yared.
Yeah.
Rabbi Eliezer Omer, not so fast. Hanosi mevi sar. The nasi brings a sar instead of an oil of a yared. In other words, he does have a fixed carbon. He has a fixed carbon by these averas. The nasi, only the melech. He does not bring an oil of a yared. He brings a sar. Says the Gemara, Tanya. We learned the Braisa. We're going to summarize Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon, Klal. Reb Shimon gave a klal when it came to the chiyuvim of Bezdin and Nasi Mashiach. Reb Shimon wanted you to remember. He knew it's a little bit difficult, so he gave a klal. He summed it up in 2 lines. He said like this: Koil shahayachid ba'asham toloi. Anyone who's mechuyev in an asham toloi, hanasi kayotzeboy. The nasi will be like the guy who was mechuyev in asham toloi, but Mashiach who Bezdin. P'turin, right? Any Asham Toli, when it comes to Asham Toli, the Nasi brings Asham Toli also. Mashiach and Bezner P'turin. V'chol shu be'Asham Vadai, Nasi Mashiach kayotzeben, u'Bezdin P'turin. So when it comes to Ashamos, right? So Nasi always is Chayiv, Bezdin is always Potter, right? By Asham Vadai, the Kohen Gadol varies. If it's Asham Vadai, the Kohen Gadol brings, and by Asham Tali, the Kohen Gadol doesn't bring. Okay, that's Reb Shimon's first half of his memra, of the klal that he gives. Shmias koil ebitas v'sayim tum six g'dashav. What about oil of a yared? Bezdin p'turin nasi Mashiach chayovin. Elo she'en nasi chayiv b'shmias koil v'lei Mashiach p'tum six g'dashav. The melech is not chayiv on shmias koil because he doesn't have to give edus, and the Kohen Gadol is not chayiv on tumas migdash v'kedashav. He doesn't bring for tumas migdash. V'kedashav. Why not? Gemara is going to explain it on Amud Beis. Okay, we'll see in Amud Beis. But either way, Nasi kayotzeboy, kol sheba'ol of a yored, Nasi kayotzeboy, Mashiach bezdin p'turin. That's the klal. Ba'ol of a yored, Nasi kayotzeboy, Mashiach bezdin p'turin. Gemara says, whoa, slow down. The last 2 lines don't make any sense. Hagufa kasha. Omer she'ein Mashiach chayiv b'tumas mikdash v'kedashav. You just told me that a Kohen Gadol is not chayiv in an oil of a yored by tumas mikdash v'kedashav. So it sounds like b'tumas mikdash v'kedashav with the potur aval b'shmiyas hakoil b'tzvah v'sayim chayiv. But he's chayiv on the other 2 averos oil of a yored. Ein b'seifa kol sheb oil of a yored. Whoever is chayiv in oil of a yored nasi kayotzeboy Mashiach bezdin p'turin. So one of shech is a Kohen Gadol chayiv in oil of a yored by shvuas bitoy and shmiyas koil or not? Which way is it? You have 2 opposite halachas in Reb Shimon's klal itself. Shimon is trying to give a klal to make it clear, but it sounds more confusing. So the Gemara says, which way is it? Does a Kohen Gadol bring an oil of a yored for Shmiyas Kol and Bitas V'sayim, or not? That seems to be a steer in Rav Shimon's statement. Says the Gemara, that sounds like, from the Sefer, it says, Kol Shabbat doesn't go to Mashiach Bezdin P'turin, Ketani Mashiach Bezdin P'turin, Ma Bezdin P'turin Mekula, not Mashiach Potter Mekula. Mashiach is Mamish Potter from everything. Says the Gemara, Kasha Adodi, it's a steer. Like kasha, it's not a kasha in Reb Shimon's statement. Kan bedalus, kan bedale dalus. Over here it's bedalus, and over there it's bedale dalus, which means what? That when the Kohen Mashiach is middle class, right, or he's wealthy, then the halacha is that he's chayiv in oil of a yored. But if he is badali dallas, we just turned the page. If he's badali dallas, if he's mamish the lowest class, then he's mamish nesmayit from all three averis. A kohen gadol, yes.
How could he would have to be wealthy.
That's right.
So how could he be?
Okay, so that was in Shitas Rabbi Yosi Aglili.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it sounds like Rabbi Akiva does not hold of that drasha.
Okay.
Yeah, that was based on a drasha, because it says over there, Misha yochel lovoi ledianiyos v'ashiros, right? Because hoyem lo higia yodoi leisasag yodoi. That was based on a drasha. Rabbi Yosi Aglili, right, originated. He made that drasha. Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold of that drasha. He says, even though you can't come ledianiyos, but you ask me if you can't come ledianiyos, so how is it shaykh b'chlal dallas and dali dallas? That's what you're asking. Because in halacha he's not allowed. He has to be an oisher, right? That's what you're asking.
Right.
So you ask him that. He has to be an oisher, so how could he come to a matzav of dallas and dali dallas? It's a great kasha. Yeah.
How could he even be middle class?
Yeah, how can he even be middle class? I'm not sure. That's a great kasha. Unless he doesn't hold to that drasha, that it has to be gadleu me'achav. But either way, the Gemara says that if he is a dalei dal, which means he's so poor, all he can bring is a mincha.
Yeah.
That we know. Zeh, he only brings a minchas chavitin, he doesn't bring any other mincha. So there he never brings an oil of a yored if it has to be a mincha. But if he's middle class, he brings Torah b'nei yoyna or behema, there the halacha will be that he only brings it on Shmiyas Kol and B'tz V'sayim, but still not on Tumas Mikdash. Gemara says, Reb Shimon Sovelak Reb Akiva b'chodo u'paligalei b'chodo. Sovelak Reb Akiva b'dalei dalus the potter u'paligalei b'dalus. Yeah, he's chaylik on him b'dalus because Reb Akiva holds that b'dalus the halacha is
He's not potter.
he's potter from the whole thing, right? Shimon will say, no, he's only nismayit from the mincha of Dali Dallas. But a tzoyin or term b'nei yoyni he would still have to bring. Okay, so that's the bottom line. Says the Gemara weiter, we learned in the Mishnah, Elo she'ein kohen gadol chayiv on Tumas Mikdash v'kedashav. Yeah, that's Reb Shimon is moide, he's not chayiv on Tumas Mikdash, he's not chayiv b'oil of yard. Omer Chizki, my time with Reb Shimon, the chesiv nichras ha'nefesh ha'im etechakol. It says by Tumas Mikdash, it says the pasuk, v'nichras ha'nefesh ha'im etechakol. Mitoich hakol means misha karbonai shavel hakol. You can only bring Tumas Mikdash v'kedash of oil of a yard on that avera if your carbon is shava lakol. Yotze she'en karbonai shavel lakol. The kohen Mashiach is not shavel lakol. Why not? Because on Yom Kippur the kol is neskaper with the sarah pnimi on Yom Kippur, right? For all the Tumas Mikdash v'kedash of. But the kohen is neskaper but par. So therefore, since he doesn't shear in the same carbon as the kol, so he's not subject to an oil of a yored by Tumas Mikdash v'kedashav. So the Gemara says, Im kain nasi nami ein karbon shavel kol. So why should a nasi be chayiv and Tumas Mikdash v'kedashav? He also is distinct from the kol, right? Because the kol brings a soyer, and the kol brings a par, and he brings a soyer. So Bazoi should be potter of Tumas Mikdash. The Gemara says no. Shava kapara de Kippurim, but at least in Kippur they are shava because the nasi, the melech, is included in the kapara of the sarah pnimi on Yom Kippur. But the kohen gadol on Yom Kippur needs his own par. Gemara says in kain kahanim nami lo shavu lakol bakapara de Yom Kippurim. So all the kahanim, that par that the kohen gadol brings, because he's not included in the sarah pnimi, is not just for the kohen gadol. It's all in the whole shevet to kahanim. So if it's all for all kahanim, and you just told me that anyone who's not included in the sarah pnimi is not subject to a oil of a yard like Tumas Mikdash, that shouldn't just include the kohen gadol. It's even all the kahanim, because all the kahanim, right, are counted on the par and not on the sorah pnimi of the kol. So all the kahanim shouldn't bring an oil of a yard like Tumas Mikdash.
So what does that mean?
So how could the kahanim be subject to the carbon of oil of a yard by Tumas Mikdash v'kedashav?
Yeah.
If you're telling me the deciding factor is whether the people are included in the Sarah Panimi, the Kapar of the Sarah Panimi and Kippur, Kahanim are not included in that. Just like the Kohen Gadol is not included. So why is only the Kohen Gadol an exception? Yeah. Let the Kahanim also be an exception. Says the Gemara, no, Kahanim Shavuot Kol B'Shar Mitzvah D'Shana Kula. They, at least, are part of the Tzibor when it comes to Parhalam Davashal Tzibor. So that's why they are still, that's called Mitoich HaKol. They're enough of the call, because when it comes to Palam Davshal Tzibur, the Kahanim are included. So the Gemara says, Mashiach Nami Yoshava B'Shai Mitzvahs Deshana. What do you mean? The Mashiach, who followed Besdin, is also Niskaper with Palam Davshal Tzibur. So Elamarova Eima Hachi. You'd have to darshan the words differently. Misha Chatosei Shovel Yechidim. A Mayni call. It's only someone whose chatos is similar to Yechidim, which means that he brings a carbon chatas on Shigigas Maisa alone. And we learned that a Kohen Gadol doesn't bring on Shigigas Maisa alone. He's Potter Lagamri from the chatas. He only brings it, it's V'hoyam, La'ashma Sa'am we darshan, compare it to the Tzibur, Palam Davshal Tzibur, you need a Hayrah, and then the Hayrah has to be followed by a Shigigas Maisa. So therefore, since he's not like the Kol in that aspect, that's why he doesn't bring an Oil of Yored by Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashav. So let's just sum it up quickly, because there's a lot over here with all the Makairis, and it can get very confusing. But just to boil it down, if we can, in 30 seconds, what we learned was there are 3 opinions of Tanoim. Heliga Tanoim, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the greatest of the greats, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shimon. 3 opinions Tanoim when it comes to an Oil of Yored. What's the halacha of an Oil of Yored? Which, by the way, Oil of Yored is brought on 3 Averis. Which 3 Averis? Shuas Eidus, Shuas Bitoy, and Tumas Mikdash. Those 3 Averis bring an Oil of Yored. The question is, what's the halacha of the Kohen Gadol when it comes to Oil of Yored? What's the halacha of the Nasi when it comes to Oil of Yored? Right. And what's the halacha of the Bezdin when it comes to Oil of Yored? So it seems like the Bezdin is for sure pater from Oil of Yored L'Kula Alma. They don't bring an Oil of Yored. Okay, that's for sure.
Which means that they all...
That if they paskin wrongly about Tumas Migdash, make a mistake, and everybody follows, they don't bring an Oil of Yored on these 3. Okay, they don't bring an Oil of Yored B'chlal.
They also have to be wealthy?
No, just Tom. There's a drosha. Okay. They don't bring it. Okay. Yeah. So what about a kohen and a nasi? And here's where it gets a little bit confusing.
Right.
So Rabbi Yossi Aglili said that the nasi is kayotzebem, also doesn't bring. It's kayotzebem like Bezdin. They are pater legamri from an oil of a yored. Rabbi Akiva says the melech is chayiv, except for Shavuos Eidus, because he doesn't have to give Eidus. Right? So you have pretty much 2 extremes. You realize you're completely pater the melech, and Rabbi Akiva says melech is totally chayiv, except the technical issue by Shavuos Eidus. Then you have the Heilige Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and Reb Shimon says in the next Mishnah, he says that the nasi is chayiv, except for the Brisa. He says the nasi is chayiv, except for shmiyas koil. Sounds like Rabbi Akiva. That sounds like Rabbi Akiva. The nasi is chayiv like Rabbi Akiva. By Kohen Gadol, we'll argue. Okay, by Kohen Gadol is different. Okay, we'll stop over here.